still, I guess if we ran it again now, it would be a little bit more weighted in Featherstone's favour as they won on the Premier Sport, the big game on Premier Sports, in the dim lights and the mud and wind.
It's so dim. It's so dim there.
You can't blame Premier Sports for that.
No, it's not Premier Sports' fault. It's old school ground fault.
Yeah.
But,
we need someone. We need another sports club to be getting rid of some floodlights, so all the Featherstone volunteers can get behind the club again and go and pick them up, drive them down, build them up, like they've done with those awesome stands they've got there. Anyway, so do you think there's any point looking beyond Featherstone and Lee, like I didn't in my poll?
Realistically, no. I can't. When you look at the squad, when you look at the squads on paper, they both of them have far stronger squads in terms of names than anybody else. The only other teams that you'd kind of mention in the same kind of conversation are probably they're nowhere near. Your Yorks, Widnesses, Bradfords, Batleys. They just don't have anything like the same kind of big names or kind of established kind of championship players as well. Because I think kind of the spine of Featherstone and Lee are both, some very, very, very strong kind of championship good quality players. So yeah, for me it wasn't. I'd love to know who the 13% were voting for, even if it's just to be a bit different. But yeah, it would be a massive surprise. I don't see the league being any more balanced than it was in 2021, really, where we had two dominant people and everyone else kind of fighting for the playoffs or avoiding relegation. And I don't really see it being any different, to be frank.
No, and I think Lee and Featherstone are full-time or almost full-time. Newcastle are the only other team that I think are pretty much running as a full-time model, aren't they? Bradford and York will have an element of full-time within their squad, but
I mean, I know in Bradford
London
it's
have
less
gone
than
back
it
to
has
part-time,
been,
haven't they? And Widnes are part-time these days as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's a it is a little bit of a league within a league, unfortunately, with the people with aspiration. And I'm not knocking people with aspiration per se, but it is quite a different set of kind of targets that both Featherstone and Lee have to Batley or Dewsbury or Whitehaven or somebody of that kind of nature.
Well, like Halifax have recruited quite a bit. Newcastle we mentioned, York we mentioned. And I still feel like those sides are substantial way off.
Yeah.
The recruitment that Featherstone and Lee have done. One thing I would point to with Featherstone and Lee, both of them, is I kind of feel like they're running with smallish squads, but at the championship level, they'll just keep bringing in loan signings until they get a chance to make another signing, that like a permanent signing. That Lee clearly have some room left to do because they've been still looking for more overseas signings, even that if they can get their hands on them. Yeah, I'm sure Featherstone will, not be backwards in taking players from Leeds at some point on loan.
No, exactly. There is that avenue there, isn't there, as well? It tends to be teams below them tends to be patching up with kind of loan signings and kind of players that are in and out every week. But yeah, they've probably, as you say, they've probably gone for big names and spent their budget on quality rather than padding the squad necessarily.
Yeah, let's go a bit deeper on that actually, because it is the first big talking point that I sort of wanted to make sure we covered about the championship. It is the nature of some of the signings at Lee and Featherstone. So at Lee, you've got Caleb Aikins, Nenny McDonald. You've got also Asa Hingano's come over from Salford as well. John Asiata's come in from the NRL. they've got so many players there who've got NRL experience that they've brought into this squad over there. I suppose we could say Joe Wardle as well. He's got NRL experience and lots of Super League and international experience too that they've brought in to that squad this year. And that's not to mention, the coaching setup there now with Adrian Lamb as the head coach, who won a League Leaders Shield November 2020. He won a League Leaders Shield in Super League.
Yeah, I think most of those names you wouldn't be surprised if they'd signed for Wakefield or Salford. They're kind of lower end Super League signings in a lot of cases, aren't they? And I think that just indicates their ambition.
Yeah, and how they've come to get some of these guys. Okay, fair enough, but they might not have been people who would have been wanted at, say, a competition that might have to travel to France, or a competition that is based in a country with stricter rules around vaccines or what have you. But
possibly.
But still, it's still impressive.
Oh yeah, you've got to you deal with the cards you dealt. They have disadvantages by being in the championship, kind of big fish in smaller ponds. But at the same time, obviously things like vaccination status and stuff like that, they are kind of advantages that you can play to your to your advantage.
Yeah, and over at Featherstone, they've more so been bringing in people who've dropped out of the Super League than going and getting big NRL signings, really. But and actually they've made some really shrewd signings from other top championship sides / League when they got relegated. So they picked up Matty Wildy and Ben Helliwell from Lee. I think good signings. They've also picked up Jesse Seni-Lefeo, to add to players like Ferris, Moores, Craig Hall, who was very good for them last year. They brought back Luke Briscoe from Leeds. Everyone should remember he had a record run of scoring tries. Morgan Smith they've brought back up from London, who's really impressed in the first 2 games. And Brandon Pickersgill they've robbed from your lot, haven't they?
Yeah. I've got to say, I was absolutely devastated. For me, he's been my favourite Bradford player of the last 2 years. He's been a brilliant player, and I completely understand why he was attracting the attention of Featherstone, because he has been for me the outstanding kind of fullback in the championship. So yeah, I completely understood why he went, and I think he's already showing a bit of class kind of at Featherstone. But yeah, it was disappointing from a personal point of view, but happy for him individually.
And the 2 biggest signings for Fev are on the field. Joey Leilua, this guy was playing in getting some pyrotechnics in his eyes in an NRL Grand Final only a couple of years ago. Maybe he's not the specimen he once was, but even in the brief time before his muscles gave up on him last night, he showed a bit of class, didn't he, in setting up that first try.
Definitely.
And off the field, Brian McDermott, we're talking about one of the most successful coaches, the most successful coach in terms of Super League wins. So that's really impressive, isn't it? What do you make of what they've done, Featherstone, this year?
They're quite intimidating in terms of competition. They were close to lose last year. They were, obviously very good, kind of just a little bit short of them. They've definitely strengthened. They're a bit like a runaway train, I think. They're kind of, it feels almost inevitable that they're going to kind of finally get their chance in Super League. They've spent, obviously they're both spending quite a lot of money, and just in the back of your mind, you are slightly wondering whether, because it can only work for one of them. One of the two, it ain't going to work. Because as far as I'm aware, 2 people are not going up this year. So, it'll be interesting to see what the fallout will be at the end of the year for the team that doesn't get promoted. But yeah, don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but both of them, but particularly Featherstone, do look very, very intimidating at this point in terms of quality of players and just general as you say, coaching ability. Just generally, they seem like a cut above the rest of the competition.
Yeah, I agree. That's us dealt with the top two. We'll go through some fan views that we had in from people telling us what they expect from their side this year when we did our predictions, because we did get a few in from Championship fans. So we'll take these in turns. Do you want to take the first one?
Yep, so Andrew Lowe talking about the Dewsbury Rams, predicting a season of up and downs like a roller coaster ride at Blackpool Pleasure Beach. Hopefully finish outside the bottom two. Rugby league, don't you just love it?
I think he's expecting more downs than ups then is Andrew there with the hope that they finish outside the bottom two. But what do you think? Dewsbury do feel like one of the teams who hasn't particularly strengthened. They'll be relying on the sort of team spirit and resolve to be better than two other sides this year. Yeah,
I think they've been a kind of consistent member of the Championship for as long as I can remember. They've always been, but at the same time they've never really flirted with the playoffs either. They've just kind of got enough wins to get by, I've always felt. I do worry about them a little bit this year. So, yeah, they're going to be on the edge of that bottom two, I would say.
Yeah.
But, hope springs eternal. You never know. They might. But, yeah, I definitely don't see them with a playoff push.
I think
for certain.
We've got a couple of other teams that will be in that conversation for the relegation battle coming up in some of the other reviews we've got. So we'll catch up on that. We'll round that out, I think, when we've finished going through these. Jason Durkin, Lee Centurions fan, expects promotion to Super League.
Dr. Hideous for the Broncos, I expect we'll be mid-table, and the Burgers at Plough Lane won't be as good as they were at Ealing. That's what we like. We like a left field prediction.
Yeah,
as always.
Ian Gatwood, also from the London Broncos fan base, said he expects the unexpected from the London Broncos. Now that is open to interpretation. So I think quite a lot of London fans still expect them to be competing at the top end like they generally have done. But last year, especially the run-in last year, I think it is a warning of what's to come for the next few years. They've trimmed down. They've gone to a part-time structure. They've brought in a coach who knows how to deal with part-time players. Now they've got a talented group. Don't get me wrong. That's largely London-based, but then with some outside influence coming in. But I don't know what the unexpected is from London this year. To me, the expected from London is mid-table between places 5 and 8. I would expect London to finish after the final reckoning. So either they finish right at the top or right at the bottom, and Ian guess what he's guessing at.
Yeah, I think London have made some understandable kind of decisions about coaching and about players. I've like you. I'm a bit more. I'm not even thinking about them as a playoff team this year, and I've always thought of them as with a chance of the playoffs before. So, yeah, I have very modest expectations of the Broncos this year.
Yeah, I think it's a sort of more on the outside chance of playoffs than an expectation of playoffs.
I just think. I mean, we'll talk about them maybe in a bit, but I just think there's too many teams that have improved this year, and I don't think London have improved.
Yeah, that is definitely fair. Although when we get to the Championship results, we'll talk a little bit about Championship news stories, and one of them is a new signing at London, so maybe that gives them a bit of optimism. Who's next?
Ian Wright, we'll go to a brief visit to League One, talking about the Midland Hurricanes, hoping for mid-table. We'll see. Coventry
had a fairly strong season last year, didn't they, in a way? They finished just outside the playoffs in the final reckoning of things. And I do think that this Midlands Hurricanes side is maybe fractionally stronger with the prospect of more people still coming in than the Bears were last year, because it looks like they've retained some of the key players. They've made some decent signings.